We're live.
It's go time again. We had a little break there, Billy,
Yeah, we
from our
did.
last recording.
Yeah,
I know you needed to get some time off and away with the family a little bit.
I am always needing to get some time off, and not always with the family, but we've had a lot of good quality time in the past few months for sure.
Yeah, that's I'm glad you call it quality time. That's a good way to put it. It really has been though. All joking aside, and I joke about the time we're spending not just with the kids, but also with my parents. Um,
Oh my goodness.
we've spent a lot of time together, and actually, it's really I think the situation with this quarantine and everything has just really made me appreciate some things that maybe I forgot to appreciate. As much as maybe sometimes my mom and I bump heads. I'm going to look back at
Hey,
this time.
don't be talking bad about Cindy. I love her.
Nah, I know you love
Yeah,
you and my mom get along great, but what I was going to say was it made me realize there's going to be a time where I'm going to be glad that, we were all hunkered down
yeah,
together like this. So, if those are some of the good things that come out of these situations, right?
yeah, yeah. Absolutely, absolutely. So we're back, episode number 4 of So What About Crypto?
Yeah, I can't believe we're just going along, and I just have to tell you, and people watching and listening, how excited I've been to talk to this next person because not that I'm not excited to talk to every single person because everyone brings something different, which is what I love. I mean, we all bring something to the table and it's all valuable for the most part. But yeah, I really enjoy interviewing people that I've met in person and knew that they were going to be something special and then go back and check on them and see how they're doing. Fast forward a year, 2 years, 3 years. I've done that in the past. When I was in TV news, I did stories where we would help people get justice, help people get something. And I would like to check back up on them like a year later and see how they're doing. And it always just makes me so happy to see that for most of the time they're doing great. And it's nice to know that I was a small, tiny part of that. So I'm really excited to talk to our next guest because this is where I feel we are now. I met him a year ago at the Bitcoin Is conference. And for people who are
That's
new and don't know what that
whose
is,
conference was
yeah,
that?
that's Russell Okung. You guys, NFL football player, was most recently with the Chargers. Believe now he's with the Carolina Panthers. Super Bowl champ, Pro Bowler, who's very, very into Bitcoin. And so I got to go to his conference and meet him and get to know him. But while I was there, I met some really awesome people uh, that I'm planning to do stories with. And Isaiah Jackson was one of the people I knew that I was going to connect with again at some point because I knew he had something special when he gave me this book. Let me take my pen out of it because I made a million notes. Bitcoin and Black America. Look at my notes. Lots of notes. But I
Wow.
made the notes in this book that he gave me, not just because I want to reference them, maybe if something comes up in conversation during the podcast right now, but for myself to go back and check. And I'll explain why once we get started talking with Isaiah, because I want to bring him in and show him that, Isaiah, I still have the book you gave me when we met at Russell Okung's conference last year in LA.
Oh yeah.
And I'm even very proud of the fact that you also signed it back when you gave it to me. So
Wow. Hey,
I feel
could you maybe sign my Kindle version? Would you be able to do that?
I'm sure we can work out a digital signature somehow.
I feel very special that I have this.
I'll get your
Yeah.
copy. And I do want to say I was nervous when I was going to give it to you because
Oh, really?
I
Why?
did. Nobody there really knew who I was. Nobody. I just kind of showed up, and I had it in mind about 5 or 6 people I really wanted to give the book to. You, Spencer Dinwiddie, Russell, of course, a few other people. So I was nervous just because sometimes you give people stuff and they're like, oh, that's cool, and then they never explore it. But I I'm glad you did. I'm glad everybody's taking a liking to the book, and this is a great time to discuss it. Glad to be here.
We're very glad you're here too. And I really feel honored that you're here because I know right now, in light of everything that's happening around us in this world, I'm sure you've been so very busy talking with everyone because we really brought a spotlight, the unfortunate, horrible situations that are happening have brought a spotlight to something that you've known, I've known to some degree, many people have known for many, many years, which is the problem of systemic racism and problems in our society with that. And I I feel like I hope that wasn't the only reason for people to talk to you about your book and why it's important, because it is, maybe people see it as the topic of the moment, but it's not of the moment for people who have experienced it their whole lives. It's not about a moment. This is a whole lifetime of stuff. So, are you finding that you're surprised by some of the people that are reaching out to you?
Yes, I am. I do believe there is a fair amount of people who may be doing a little bit of virtue signaling, just sort of reaching out because this is a good time period. For the most part, most of the people that have reached out have been sincere in their plight to try to include the Black community in Bitcoin, as well as the economic improvements we need. I will say the biggest shout outs I've gotten or people that have helped came before these unfortunate events. However, it is good to see that people who did like the book and then they saw these protests happening sort of took it upon themselves to hold signs at protests, which that picked up really big on social media. And, those people read the book way before this happened. So, there are a few people that are just taking, advantage of the moment. But for the most part, people recognize the importance of this book when it came out last year in July. So now that we're about a year forward, I believe this is a great time to discuss it. And like you said, some people are doing it just for the time period, but if that's what gets them into the game, gets them into actually helping and solving this problem of racism, then so be it.
Well, that's a very good attitude to have about it. I guess you do also on your end too have to take advantage of the fact that you're being given a platform too, and which is what you wanted to do with the book in the first place. So I really hope that people truly take what they're going to find in this book to heart. But before we get to that, I know your life is not what it was a year ago. Things have really, really been great for you. Your book is doing very well, and it was doing well before we have found ourselves in this situation in history. But before you wrote the book, could you ever imagine that you'd be where you are right now?
I could imagine it, but no, I really didn't think it would take
is it like what you imagined, I guess, would be the better question.
You always have dreams. As you're writing the book, you think to yourself, this is going to take off and, people around the world are going to read it and be impacted and they're going to help themselves. And, as it's happening now, it really is taking off. But just the amount of feedback and how much people like it, I did not expect it. I'm one of my worst critics. I don't think I'm that great of a writer. I just think I have a lot of passion. So it comes out on the pages and information so people understand it. But, I'm one of my biggest critics, but everybody who loves it, everybody who has responded to it has made me feel more secure. So, at this point, I'm starting to believe it. And, a year ago, it was a totally different world for me. And, it's been sort of a whirlwind, but I enjoy it. Love it. Can't wait to keep it going for the foreseeable future.
Well, I'm so happy for you. I just love nothing more than to see people succeed, especially people like you who are doing something very incredible and very selfless to spend the time learning so that you can teach other people. But before you got to the book, you had a completely different life. You were just like most of us who thought we'd go to school, get a career, pay our dues, work for nothing, basically work our way up. And it seemed like an insurmountable task. You were a teacher.
Yes. I come from a family of teachers. So My mother's a teacher, aunts are teachers, my grandmother's a teacher. I have cousins that are teachers now. I have a family full of educators, and that was my first job out of college. My first official job. I taught high school in Raleigh, North Carolina. Shout out to East Wake High School. Gave me my first job there. But as much as I wanted to be an educator, I realized that the public education system was tainted. It was underfunded. The teachers were overworked. As I described in the book, we made basically just enough money to go back to work. Teachers are notoriously underpaid. And one of the things I wanted to point out, being an educator and, moving forward, is that teaching people about subjects can be done in any forum. I just got out of public education, decided to go with Bitcoin because, in my opinion, once you learn something that's valuable and you apply it to your life and it works, you should teach other people how to do it. And that's what I've been doing the last 7 years now.
You're still a teacher, though.
It doesn't go away. So, yeah.
Yeah.
You're definitely 7 years, man. That's dedication, man. Because you just look at early Bitcoiners, when they talk about, not knowing if this thing was going to take off or not, and just had a passion. You kind of went through that, I'm sure, but you also took it upon yourself to write a book and sort of, try to start a movement to help people, which, is probably to some degree a thankless task for a pretty long time. But, did you ever reach a point where you're like, man, I just don't know if it was worth it,
the physical part of me was at a few times I was just like, why do I care so much? It's like, especially, as Bitcoin gained in price from a money point of view, I really didn't need to do it. But from a spiritual standpoint, I spend a lot of time talking to people about meditation and how speaking with my ancestors a lot of times and try and get things from family members. It was just my plight to show people in my community why Bitcoin was important, simply because every time I would come up with solutions or come up with things, it's one of those things where you kind of look around and it's like, why is nobody talking about this? Why is this not on, in every conversation that we have? And that was the reason for getting into consulting and then onward to the book. So, it's just something in me that I felt I had to do. And I think everybody who's successful at anything should have the plight to reach back and teach other people. And it doesn't feel like work. I mean, every day I wake up, it feels good to help other people get into Bitcoin. Because like I said, I don't need to do it. I definitely want to do it. And I think that's why the response is so organic and has been as good as it is.
Isn't that incredible, though? Because Isaiah, I feel the same way that, I was in television news 21 years, working for the networks. And once I learned all about this and what it was about, it's only been, I guess, about 1.5 years, almost 2 years. I felt compelled to do something with this knowledge about Bitcoin and blockchain. I really became consumed and very compelled, like you, to show people why this is important. When I first learned about it at this private event, as the people on the panel were explaining what it was, I was looking around the room going, are you guys getting this? Because nobody seemed moved. But I was really like, oh my God, this is incredible. Like, I wanted to jump up and go, are you people hearing this? It's like you're telling them they want $1 million to their face and they're just sitting there like, yeah. I know that feeling, that compulsion that makes you feel like you want to teach people about this, because I left TV news to start over and do this, the podcast, but which was recent, but our content that Bill and I have spent over the last 1.5 years, 2 years shooting to teach people. But that's the thing about Bitcoin and blockchain and everything in between, that once you learn about it, it's like this light switch is flipped and you do feel the need to tell everybody about it, because to me, it's justice. It's social justice. And that's one of the reasons why I got into TV news. You want to get people justice. You want to help people. You want to tell their stories. And, as a teacher, same thing. You want to help people. You want to teach them. You want to give them advantages. This is a no-brainer. This is like the ultimate justice, right? The ultimate advantage.
Absolutely. And, I sort of compare finding out about Bitcoin to falling in love. You got to be a little crazy to get into it, but once you do, you want to tell the world, right? It's sort of how most people go about when they find out about Bitcoin. It's sort of like you said, a light switch goes off. Mm-hmm. And then you start to, in my opinion, you start to question a lot of the things you were taught about the financial industry. And then you dig a little bit deeper. You don't have to go as deep as I did. I definitely went down the wormhole a few nights. But if you go just a little bit deep, you can see the corruption that has happened and why this is needed. Like you said, you would sit there and say, hey, are you guys hearing this? Like this, everybody should be jumping up and down. Most people don't understand that even if you have money, you should have more. Your personal power should be worth more. Your taxes should not be as much as they are. The oversight in the financial industry should not be as much as it is. So even if you're doing okay, you can do better. So everybody should be on board to try and change the system.
In fact, it's almost worse to me if you're doing quite well, mm-hmm. because I think the less disadvantaged a person is, the less marginalized a community is, they're not as quick to see why this is so important. When you peel back the layers of how banks are run, how corporations are run, how Wall Street is run, you start to see just below the surface, holy crap, there's a lot of bad stuff here that's happening. And we're all just a bunch of worker bees. And boy, things could be a lot different in so many ways, but it's just below the surface. I used to call it the golden handcuffs, because I made really good money as an on-air television anchor reporter, but those are like golden handcuffs because I believed I had it good. And I really had no idea, even as a reporter and somebody who's in news, I really had no clue what was really going on financially.
Exactly. And that's why we have to work harder to get this financial education out. And also, going forward in the future, most of the people that I've discussed Bitcoin with our industry that already are Bitcoiners, they've all kind of echoed the sentiment that if you talk to someone in a country like Zimbabwe, or a country like South Africa or Venezuela or India, or somewhere where you can basically say, hey, this money is a hedge against your government, they get it instantly. They don't even really question it. They're like, anything is better than what we have to deal with. Americans are kind of spoiled. A lot of Bitcoiners I talk to are like, yeah, Americans will question you for years, not just, have people that still to this day are like, well, I still don't understand and I'm like, see, as an American, you think our money is safe. It never happened to us. Even though the Fed is printing trillions of dollars as we speak, they're literally doing it right in front of you. That is one of the things I think long-term international countries get it faster. So they'll actually act on it and innovate faster than US will at this point. We're too political operations. And, I just think that is the sentiment for a lot of Bitcoiners in the industry.
And, we see things from afar, too. We look at ourselves as Americans and see stuff on the news and go, wow, at least we're not Venezuela. I mean, boy, those poor people. You really don't know what you truly have it like here and what you could have it like here in the United States. We are very much in belief that we truly are financially free and the banks work for us and, things are running fine. This is how I pay for things: cash, debit card, credit card. It's good. It's good. I know where my money is. I'm led to believe it's safe here. And, I don't know about you, Isaiah, but the biggest questions I get from people who start asking questions about Bitcoin, biggest questions, is it safe? Because nobody wants to find out that their money disappears into thin air one day, if they were hacked or whatever. Is it safe? What can it do for me? Why should I leave what I already know? It seems to be working fine. My bank is fine. Using the credit cards are fine. My job is fine. That's the biggest hurdle I have with people.
Absolutely.
Well, like you said, until it isn't. And that seems to me to be kind of the theme maybe of your book, among others. And I'd love for you to elaborate a bit on the sort of, strategy that you would want to employ to empower Black people to take on, their own sort of sovereignty. But one thing that stood out in your book, and as I was reading it, is a line that you said that said, you used to look at Bitcoin through the lens of desperation and not emancipation. But how do you get other people to look at it that way? What's your plan? How do you see that like literally playing out?
Oh yeah, great question. So as far as emancipation, and as how I describe it, the reason it does free you is because it gives you self-sovereignty. It gives you the ability to control your own money. And the conversation right now around a lot of Black Americans is sort of a perfect storm, because a lot of Black Americans are saying, all right, we're in a system that doesn't care about us. So what are the solutions for the future? And we want real, true economic freedom. Bitcoin can be there to do that. And I think when people see the price, it brings them in. But when they figure out why they need it, why the system, or how the system has, systematically held them back, I think that teaching people that most of the times, once I get through the first 3 or 4 slides that describe banks and redlining and some of the discriminatory loan practices, most Black people are like, you're right. They really don't care about us. So they go from that, and then I offer a solution of Bitcoin, and that's sort of how we get them to realize that. And as far as security, when people ask about security, Bitcoin has not been hacked. People have, and you do need to have good security. It's sort of like if somebody robbed a bank and you decided not to use cash anymore. That doesn't make any sense. Right. People get robbed, not Bitcoin. Bitcoin security, Bitcoin has had pretty much 100% uptime. Bitcoin itself has never been hacked, and the security that you need can be taught by people like myself. But if you don't want to hold on to it, we have a lot of third-party custodial services that'll hold it, BitGo, others that can hold it in cold storage, which were not available when I first started. They are available today, though. So it's a lot easier to onboard people and to make them feel comfortable about moving their Bitcoin. But you do want to make sure you control those private keys, not your keys, not your coin. So make sure you do have wallets with private keys.
Right, which is a pretty common saying in this community, not your keys, not your coin. Just for the new people who are just learning, by the way, a lot of the things that Isaiah has said, some of the words that Bill has said and I have said, you could either find defined in the book or, Google them just to get familiar with some of the terminology, because I know it's a little overwhelming to hear all these words flying at you, and people might have the tendency to go, well, I don't understand this, I'm just going to shut down, and obviously we don't want them to do that. But I along the lines of not looking at Bitcoin as a get rich quick type of thing. I know people hear those stories. It's like, oh, I bought Bitcoin at, $1 and now it went up to 20 grand. Woo. It's not just about that. Yes, of course, people are interested in making money and bettering their lives, but it's a lot more than that, which is very well detailed in the book. But another thing along the lines that Bill brought up, desperation versus emancipation, is another theme that you've threaded through the entire book is the thought of self-fulfilling prophecy. What do you mean by that when you talk about that as a thought, or at least a thought a community should have, keep in mind when they think about Bitcoin?
Yes, so we've discussed a lot in my community, amongst my family, amongst other people, about group economics and about being able to support Black-owned businesses in order to keep the dollars in our community and basically uplift ourselves. And Bitcoin can be a self-fulfilling prophecy, because if we decide to practice group economics and we also want to increase the wealth of our community, if you use Bitcoin and use it for payments, and it is part of the circular economy, it doesn't have to be completely Bitcoin, but for the most part, if people have it as an option and they're holding it for savings, businesses and individuals, a self-fulfilling prophecy comes about when you say we need to have a circular economy, which happens, and our value needs to increase, which if you look at Bitcoin over time has increased from 6 cents 10 years ago to almost 10,000 today, which I think it will continue on because of the value proposition. So if you start that circular economy, you get basically a self-fulfilling prophecy of using better money to, basically create group economics and also increase the value of that community. All at the same time, you can basically kill 2 birds with 1 stone.
Which then leads to sovereignty, right?
Then you can hire private police that will not kill you in the street. is what will
Yes.
that's what can be achieved. You can get healthcare that doesn't disproportionately kill Black women. You know, you can get banks that actually give loans based on your merit and not based on your skin color or your zip code. These things can happen once you have sovereignty, and you can't really achieve it until you have something like Bitcoin.
Right, which people don't understand. When you start to see it through those lenses, you really start to understand that, wow, okay, banks have a lot of power, as you outlined in your book, and which is information all over the internet. The Federal Reserve, if I get this right, gives the banks the money, and then the money, the people at the banks get to decide who gets it and who doesn't. And then when you add in things like prejudice, systemic racism, all those things, you see how it becomes less and less available to certain amounts of people and certain genres of people, and so on and so forth. You see the layers. And once you can start seeing the layers of how we get to the point where we are today, that's when the light switch goes off. I would hope for people to see why sovereignty is just not this word that means, oh, we're free. Yeah, well, we're already free. Well, we're not really. And I think people need to go back and understand what sovereignty truly means and go back and re-examine whether or not we as Americans are truly sovereign.
Exactly. I think the term has basically, it had a stopping point. It was sovereign. You can be as sovereign as you want. You can grow your own food, you can establish your own water system, maybe have electricity grid, that you can build your own house. You can do all these things and become sovereign, but it always stopped at money, because money was always controlled since 1913, since the Federal Reserve was created. And I don't think there's too many people alive who were here when it was created. It's only a few. So most people don't have any idea of a money system outside of the control that the Federal Reserve has had. So when you create or come up with something new, it is sort of hard to get people to understand that you can be sovereign. You can not use a bank. You can have your own money. Groups of people can get together and decide, we don't want to use that money anymore. We'll use something else. That is very possible today. And your sovereignty starts with money. That is the root of it. Then everything else that you want to do is dependent on that. So yes, that is being a true sovereign individual, is having that money and being able to use it. It's unconfiscatable, and it's censorship resistant. Nobody can stop you from using it. Great, which is great news for the Black community.
Well, I completely agree, but I also in reading your book felt like, well, this is a call for everyone to learn about the potential of it. But I think you'll agree with me when I say that there's a long, long road ahead of not only getting everyone to sort of buy into the idea of sovereignty and using Bitcoin and all of these things that are in your book, but for people that don't already have a lot of capital, they're living paycheck to paycheck and just maybe trying to get food on the table. It seems like part of your book is, certainly promoting the idea of saving, investing, speculating. Those are paths to some affluence that Bitcoin can offer in somewhat, huge ways, we hope. But how do you had to personally, I'm sure, make a decision to go, I'm going to put some of my money aside into this Bitcoin thing because I can see the big picture. But we all know that there's just a gigantic part of the world that doesn't see it yet and won't see it until it's too late. They'll FOMO into it and then get wrecked. And so what do you do? Like, how can you go about literally sounding the alarm bells to people?
I think one of the best ways is using outlets from very popular people to get the word out. I do want to shout out Jack Dorsey, creator of Twitter. He shouted out the book in February, which was huge. And as soon as that happened, that's sort of like ringing the alarm that, yes, Bitcoin in Black America is a thing. People in the Black community are starting to wake up. So reaching out to people like that, I've had a few famous people have posted it on their Instagram with millions of followers. So sort of ringing the alarm that way. And then also being able to, once I get back on the book tour, being able to talk to people talking to the right people, not necessarily all the people, because there are certain people like Dr. Claude Anderson, who's big in economics and Black community, pastors, where 80% of the Black community attends some sort of religious activity. Getting the word to them so that they can get it to their parishioners or to their followers or users is paramount right now. And that's what I've been working on for the past few months, getting it to them so that when they talk to the people that believe what they're saying or that trust in their advice, hopefully I can convince them so that they can convince others. So that's the plan. And you mentioned Russell Okung earlier. Me and him are actually planning a Bitcoin in Black church book tour. So just so we can actually get the word out to some of these big churches who take in millions of dollars in tithes every year, but they have no option for Bitcoin to hold it as an asset for later, much like the Catholic Church. So, we're working on that now. And that is one of the ways to ring the alarm, so to say.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of fear, though, Bill.
There's
a lot of fear among any community that to let go of their money and do it in a different way. It's scary.
That's true of all of us. But, I think if I understood correctly in the book, one of the strategies you extolled was to really find a way for people to have to pay with Bitcoin. And, my mind goes directly to like hip hop artists or people who create a product that's highly desirable, but are willing to say, I'm going to go out on a limb and just only sell my product for Bitcoin. But it's got to be somebody huge that's just like hits the, like almost on a legendary scale of this is a new way of doing business in the music business, for instance. Are you seeing any of that to where a person's willing to just put it all on the line, name the biggest, let's say Jay-Z. What if he just all of a sudden said, I'll never sell anything unless it's with Bitcoin? Are there people thinking that way?
I will say from the hip hop artists, the entertainers that I know, most of them see Bitcoin as an investment because that's how it was presented to them. Usually their financial advisors. I'm not saying I'm smarter than them, but most of them were so late. They can only really see it as an investment, and they heard it just in passing. However, there are people like Russell Okung, like Spencer Dinwiddie, who are saying, "Pay me in Bitcoin. I only want to be, paid in Bitcoin." The people that we need to say that, I believe there's some politics at the top. People like Jay-Z, maybe Beyonce, some of these people, LeBron James. Some of the politics that goes into the money that they get in endorsements may hinder that, but I don't think they're going to have a choice at a certain point. They're going to jump on the train like everybody else. Everybody has, their period of, I don't know if Bitcoin's going to work. And then a little bit happens, over the years, and they're like, oh, so this is real. Oh, so this is real as well. I think that's going to happen. It's going to get into society so much they won't have a choice but to accept Bitcoin. And it'll be, in my opinion, a better choice. And once we get one big person to say it, you're right. The ripple effect will be huge.
But I agree, though, with you, Isaiah. It's great to get big names like Russell. And Russell has a much deeper understanding, in my opinion, of what Bitcoin is way beyond an investment. But even getting famous people like Beyonce and Jay-Z and those types of people, Akon even, but he also has a deeper understanding as well. Akon, for people who are listening, is a singer, rapper, entertainer, very obviously very popular, very famous, but he has a deeper understanding. If you look him up, he's got a much deeper understanding of what it's about as well. But I think ultimately, it's us little people who are going to drive some of those big names to say, well, my fans are demanding that they pay for concerts, or at least have the option to pay for concerts with Bitcoin or some other, Ethereum, which is an alternative coin, which is all explained in the book. But also, if you start searching for people who are listening, they just want options to pay in different types of cryptocurrencies or digital currencies. That is going to drive some of those very famous people to have to give in to the fans.
Also, and I agree completely with both of you, but just to be clear, what I was referring to is not so much the legendary name of a person, but someone who's willing to put their product out, that they have a highly desirable product, and that forces people to use it to purchase that product, whether it's music, or any other thing, tickets to football games, anything, but something needs to happen that sort of forces people into that economy and gives them that huge desire to get Bitcoin, to spend it, and because they have no choice, because they want that product. I don't know what it is, but we don't see enough of that, to benefit any community yet. And and again, my fear is that we're all too late to the game if we don't start waking up to it. And what makes that happen? So that's where I think I'm referring to maybe needing some help from the bigger name people to go out on a limb and say, we're just going to force you to do it. I don't know who they are, what they have, but something's got to make people want to use it more. I hope before it becomes so desperate that you have to use it, that it's going to be hurtful if you don't,
Well, we have some bridges to that time period you're thinking of, where somebody will be forced to use Bitcoin for a high selling product. Right now you have like Fold app is one service. You actually get savings if you pay for things with Bitcoin. So if you have consumers that are saying, hey, I can save 10% on my Starbucks or on my Amazon payment or on Target, if I pay with Bitcoin, they will start using it instead of fiat currency. It's a very new company. It's a very, not a new concept. I think gift.io is the first to do cashback rewards or to give discounts if you pay in Bitcoin, but stuff like that, as well as, Mark Cuban accepting Bitcoin for Dallas Mavericks games. He didn't require it, but if he, for some reason, said we're only accepting Bitcoin for merchandise, that would be a catalyst sort of for what you're saying. So we're on the bridge there, Bill. It's just takes time. And I'm with you.
Yeah.
I think somebody will pull that, but I think, let's say Bitcoin passes all-time highs this year. Somebody's going to do it before the end of this year. I mean, that's sure. Just because people FOMO into it. The mindset is, okay, well, Bitcoin doesn't go away. It's not going away at any time soon. And I would rather have Bitcoin, which, a lot of people sentiment is once the price goes up, and then that brings them in. But what keeps them there is the actual use case.
So as part of your premise in the book, as I understand it, that if you could get the Black community to get involved early enough that when there's this gigantic boom in Bitcoin and it becomes the sort of reserve currency, they're ahead of the game and can profit and be more enriched in that. If they don't do it now that we have institutional money on this coming in and sort of raking it in and taking a bigger share of it, how can you expedite that knowledge? Because it really is a time is of the essence type thing. What do you think about that?
Well, I've provided dozens of tutorials, hours of tutorials, of course, writing the book, working on a follow-up to the book, a second edition, trying to get the word out as fast as possible to as many people. And like you said, the institutional money is coming in, and also not just focusing on Bitcoin and the price going up, but also positioning yourself to get blockchain certifications, to get jobs in the blockchain field, to apply blockchain or Bitcoin to your business you already have. Because even if you can't buy it, there are people who are accountants, who are lawyers, who do freelance work. If they can just accept Bitcoin as payment, they can acquire Bitcoin over time. So they won't necessarily have to buy it. It'll just be a valuable asset that they would probably rather accept than cash. So I think that is one way to appease people on the way there. But yes, definitely, time is of the essence. I've tried to be as urgent with my message, which is why I wrote it a year ago, because I knew 2020 something big was happening. I didn't know it would be to this extent, but I knew in 2020 something big would happen. It's always something.
Well, 2020 especially has seemed incredibly exhausting, and we're just halfway through. We have a long way to go. But another thing that really struck me about your book was reminding people that we don't owe the banks or anybody anything as far as putting our money there or using them to be able to shop and purchase and save and put our money away. I think one of the barriers that I've found with people is that they have a hard time understanding that peer-to-peer Bitcoin, being able to pay peer-to-peer in how you want with the bank in the middle and going right over the bank, it's hard for them to visualize that because, again, that's been burned in our minds that you need a bank. So when a lot of people who are outside of this community hear, oh, you can be your own bank and banking the unbanked, they seem like just throwaway phrases or sayings to people who aren't in this industry or in this space. How important is it for people to understand that part of Bitcoin?
Oh yeah, that is probably the most important part of it with Bitcoin, as far as learning how it's actually used, why you need it is the most important part. Because, like I said, price can go up all you want. You want people to actually be able to use it, and banking the unbanked is the point of crypto, basically. Moving away from banks is big, of course, but in the Black community, is 20% of our community is unbanked. And, some of that comes from the distrust of banks from older Black people. I know a lot of people in my community that used to keep cash in a mattress. They didn't trust banks 50 years ago. And I used to think it was the craziest thing ever. But growing up, now I see why they thought that way. They just didn't have another option. And now they do. And I think unbanking, or banking the unbanked, so to say, with crypto is the mission. And getting people to join the financial system to be able to make quick payments for cheap, very low price is the point. And we want to get people to be able to do that in every community. But of course, over time, it'll take some time, but that is the point, is to get people who are not a part of the financial system into the financial system.
I know in the Latino community, you're probably very well aware of this. There are a lot of Latinos who don't have bank accounts for the same reasons. They distrust, they don't want to put their money in there. They think they're going to be targeted for whatever reasons, whether they're here undocumented or documented, and they have people in the family who aren't documented, whatever the reason. And so a lot of people in the Latino community use services like Western Union and all these money services that wire money to family in other countries. One of the things I want the Latino community to learn is that there is another way. Because if they go to some of these services, these wiring services, they get charged huge fees. If you've ever used Western Union, and I'm not singling them out. Services like Western Union all involve big fees, and it takes time, and you got to go down there, and it's, people send money home often enough that this could become a real time consuming, expensive thing to do. So for the Latino community, I can see it being beneficial that way, because they can send Bitcoin directly to family instantly and with very tiny fees. But it's the same for everybody else too. If you want to wire money to family or get money to people in other countries, or you have business transactions, going through a bank is also cumbersome and expensive as well. So I try to use these examples to explain to people how cool it would be if you could just jump over that barrier of a bunch of fees and holding up your money and worrying about whether or not the bank is going to question you, why it's going, where it's going, all the other things that people have become afraid of, that they can just skip all that, get the money to their loved ones or whoever it is they want to get it to. And wow, you did all of this without a bank.
Absolutely. And I agree totally with you. My Latino brothers and sisters, my ex-girlfriend is Latino, so I've been deep in the community and discussed a lot of these things, with remittance payments, sending back home being, like you said, one of the biggest things. It's a very cash-based economy, in a lot of Latino neighborhoods. It's very cash-based, but unfortunately, our economy is moving to a cashless economy. So you're literally leaving out millions of people as soon as they start saying more cashless businesses. Unfortunately, where I live in LA, I've seen 3 new businesses become cashless in the face of the COVID-19. So like I said, we have sort of a perfect storm of digital money coming and germs. Like, people don't want germs. So
dirty fiat.
Yeah, dirty fiat.
Dirty fiat.
Yeah, it's funny that it started out as a meme and it's literal now. So when you have a cashless society coming and digital payments provide oversight that some people in the Latino community do not want. Like you said, they're scared for their family or for others that there may be some sort of oversight they don't want. Yeah, Bitcoin seems like a no-brainer. But like you said, some people have to realize they need it and then get in the proper education, and then you go from there. And like I said, hopefully one day I can see Bitcoin in brown America from somebody, because I think they have just as much plight as I do to discuss economic disparities. And
Elsa. All right, so
Bitcoin Brown America.
That's your next book, Elsa.
My next book.
So let me ask you this. You talk a lot about the black dollar in the book, which I'm not quite sure I understood entirely. But one thing that did stand out to me is, like, in my mind, of what a black dollar could be, it would be like the project you referred to called GWAP, I think is
GWAP Coin.
GWAP Coin. And just in looking at that, looks like something that, to me, gives an opportunity for it to be a truly sort of enclosed economy with, a community-based economy. And is that part of the strategy, part of the sort of goal of what you're trying to, propose?
Absolutely. So,
and explain that the whole
black
project, if you don't mind.
Yes. I'll explain that as well. So the black dollar is a reference to Black people using their dollars that they've had to circulate amongst their community, because research has shown that a lot of immigrant communities we have just in LA, we have Koreatown, we have Chinatown, we have Little Ethiopia. You have a lot of immigrant groups that stuck together, and they own the businesses and the houses in the area. So the money is always circulated between them. They send each other's kids to college, basically. That is what is missing in the Black community. We tried with group economics, with Black Wall Street, with Rosewood, with Wilmington, and everybody got murdered, literally. Right. Not like something you see on TV and they just arrested people. No, they burned it to the ground. They murdered women and children, and they said we do not want to see the rise of a sort of group economics from the black dollar because of the strength it could have shown. Because people don't realize the number one time for Black-owned businesses is now, the second biggest time was the late 1800s. This is right after slavery, right before Federal Reserve. When Black people were left to their own wits, the black dollar was circulating just fine, and we were creating Black Wall Streets all around the country. Unfortunately, those were brick and mortar stores, so they could be burned down. But today, the reason I'm so adamant about the black dollar and moving towards Bitcoin being that solution is you can't burn down Bitcoin. You can't, there's nothing you can do to take it away. And if we have a digital economy that is built or that uses Bitcoin, the only way it can be taken away is if you give it away. And I don't think any Black people are willing to do that after what we've been through. So that is what I mean by the black dollar and group economics and how that works, because it's worked for a lot of other groups who have been left alone to build their communities. Because I mean, like I said, I mentioned Koreatown. They have businesses in their native language because they don't even care if you know what it says on that sign, because it's their community. So, and I mean, the Hasidic Jews in New York, their communities, the police run away when they come outside because they do not want those problems if they have to get sued or if they mess with them, because the economic power they have in their community, they own it. That's what happens. And unfortunately, we don't have that as much in Black communities. I would like to see a return to that in the brick and mortar stage, but I know for a fact it can happen digitally.
So how would you use it? But sorry, Elsa, I just wanted to ask if you could sort of explain that GWAP coin, and is that a possible solution or a sort of something that brings it into just a community-based currency, so to speak? Absolutely.
So GWAP coin is an example of a solution. There's other coins that have been created with this thought in mind. And yes, I believe Bitcoin is the reserve currency we should use. But as far as a daily payment system, there may be something like GWAP coin that may be a little faster, maybe a little bit easier for people to learn about and use. So I'm open to pretty much any project that'll help with that. And I think GWAP coin can do that, as well as some of the other projects I've seen come out as well.
You know, some of the things or examples I like to give people who still are trying to grasp the concept of blockchain technology, which is the technology that Bitcoin runs on. I try to give them examples of them being able to do things that were only reserved for institutional investors, the very wealthy, insider people, people in high society. And that is to do things like invest in art, real estate, cars. But there's a way to do that called tokenization. And I try to explain to people that there's going to be a time one day that's actually already happening now with certain companies where you never dreamed you'd be able to invest in art and cars and real estate because, like Bill pointed out, most people and families are living paycheck to paycheck. I think the story that came out last year, I believe maybe USA Today, outlined that most families don't have $400 extra in case they encounter an emergency. So, of course, investing, I mean, that's crazy talk. It would have been in my house. My parents were concerned about roof over the head, food on the table, shoes on the feet, and you go into school. You got those things, you're good. There was no psychology and understanding and having discussions. It was very much really surviving in our family. Yeah, I had a teenage mother, so the odds were stacked against them, but there are a lot of families who have those kinds of challenges. So I try to explain to people, which you also explain in the book, that imagine if, like, say the Mona Lisa was put up for sale and everybody had an opportunity to buy just a portion of it. I have $100. I want to invest into that Mona Lisa painting, and you can. And now, because of tokenization, you put your $100 for the token and you own a teeny tiny bit of the Mona Lisa or whatever commodity is tokenized. And the more you do that, the more you build, something like that continues to gain value. And so your tokens gain value and you're investing. And companies are doing that with art and real estate, and people for the first time in their lives are getting to see that maybe they get a piece of that pie.
Absolutely. And I'm so glad to see it. Tokenization has been one of the subjects that is very interesting simply because that is going to change everything. There will be no reason for you to have to go through so much paperwork for real estate. Like you said, buying valuable things for a small fraction of the price, being able to crowdfund as a group is going to be very monumental. Now, we can just get regulators to back off a little bit. We can move forward a little faster because they still want to consider it the same thing as before when this is something totally different. And tokenizing things has already worked for some people already in certain industries. And I think the innovation that comes from tokenizing stuff like NBA contracts or tokenizing, companies with investments from around the world. All of these things put people in a position to, like you said, use a small amount of money to invest and move forward. And for people who thought you had to be an accredited investor or to be rich to do this, tokenization allows you to be a regular Joe Schmo, and you can spend $10 a week investing in certain things. So I love it, and I think that is going to be paramount to the industry booming long term.
So are you, is that part of your, education, is helping maybe future Black business owners know that they could tokenize their business or portions of it, or, some of their intellectual property or anything like that?
Absolutely. I tell business owners that a lot of times real estate is where I focus when I talk about that, simply because I used to do IT for a real estate law firm. So I got to see the ins and outs of how real estate works and how convoluted it was. Like if somebody bought a house, they would have to come in, they would have to get their check in paper, and then for the bank to get paid, somebody had to drive to the bank to take it to them. And it was so many steps in between. It was way too much. And that's where the costs come in. That's where sort of the time you save and fees, all of that goes away when it's tokenized, when people can purchase it, and the investment into it can happen like that in 24 hours, so to say. So yes, I focus more on real estate when I talk about tokenization, but I do tell business owners that because I use an example in the book. Dawn Dixon, she was the first Black-owned business to tokenize her raise sale for Popcom, and she raised 1.4 million. and sold those tokens, and it was successful. So it can be done, and it will be done in the future.
I know, Isaiah, you're very passionate about this. I'm passionate about it. Bill's very passionate about it. We're driven, I think, by a sense of justice. I think that's very clear with you, with all of us. But has there been any other experiences in your life that make you more sensitive to wanting to give justice? Like, have you experienced direct racism or prejudice throughout your life? And what were some of the incidents that stand out the most to you?
Oh, yeah. So I've been physically assaulted by police twice. I've been, well, I mean, I can give the stories. One, mistaken identity. I went to a store beside a bank that had been robbed earlier, and the police ticker that went out to colleges, whenever you got an email, the description that they put was between 5'6" to 6'3", black male, black hoodie, in the middle of the winter. So it's pretty much every black dude on campus. So I guess they thought I went back to a store that was right beside the bank that was just robbed earlier, and they literally slammed me on the ground. A few bruises, nothing big, but just to ask me questions about what was not just, not that I was going to jail, just to do that. The police tried to grab me out of the car. He walked up to it. He didn't say license registration. He just opened the door, tried to pull me out. The seatbelt actually stopped him from doing it, and because I guess he was embarrassed, he just stopped because I'm like, my seatbelt's on. So I've been physically assaulted by cops. I've had in educational circles, I've been a 4.0 student my whole life. I've gotten so many snarky remarks from a lot of white people who copied off my paper to get A's, or they would say, hey, you got into this program because of affirmative action, or I'm glad they got affirmative action so you can get into the school.
Yeah, and I've heard that one a couple times for me.
I mean, just little snarky stuff like that. Economically, I grew up in rough neighborhoods all the way up until 14. My mom was a teacher, so of course she didn't make a lot of money. So we lived in a food desert. We lived where there wasn't really no healthy food options. Education was poor. Learning to me came directly from my mother because she was a teacher. My friends weren't as fortunate, even though I grew up in the same circumstance. I was doing the same stuff. Education was lost at that capacity. Then as a black person, seeing a lot of the things that has happened to us over the years, I have a grandmother who literally was at the tail end of slavery. She can literally describe these stories coming from them, the marches they had in the 60s, a lot of the drug war things that wrecked the black community. I have friends who have gone to jail for years for doing a crime that was way less than some of my white friends who do it all the time. They don't even get looked at. So as far as discrimination, as far as the black community, as far as the things we've gone through, I've gone through them too. Maybe a little bit more laid back, only because I spiritually I feel like there's something for me, so I don't really worry about it. But yes, and this is not what I'm telling you is not like a outlier. You walk on the street and ask 10 black dudes the same question you just asked me. 9 of them I have a similar story. So in my opinion, the stuff has happened. It's not going to stop me because I can't look my children in the face and say, I'm sorry I couldn't support you because of racism. I'm not going to let that stop me. But yes, all this stuff has happened, and it pushed me to the point where I looked at the economic side of it. Why does this stuff happen? And kind of put it all together. And that's why I wrote the book. That's why I'm doing what I'm doing, and we'll continue to do it. I don't plan on stopping anytime soon.
What do you think of the, with the protests that are going on now? Do you feel like that's all organic, or is it a combination of people getting involved that really should have no business involved with it? Or, what's your take on it?
So my take is there are people who genuinely and organically want to march and want to have their voices heard. Unfortunately, our movement, Black people's movement, has been co-opted by people that have no business there. I've seen enough videos, I've seen enough economic and financial evidence to suggest that certain movements do not benefit us. And if we want to talk about it, the statement Black Lives Matter is true, but the organization is not helping us. So for anybody who is confused, I am a Black person telling you Black Lives Matter is not helping Black people. And most organizations haven't helped Black people long term. They just have a black face on an organization that does just enough to appease Black people, and then everybody goes home. NAACP, I don't know why they still have colored people on there. They don't support us. trust me, these movements, in my opinion, there are people who feel adamant and want to march, but the movement has been co-opted by people who have way more money than I will ever have. And I know personally, there are actors who go out to a lot of these protests. There are provocateurs who show up just to wait for the crowd to get big and smash windows, and then all of a sudden it's looting. There is cooperation from police to leave a bait car. If you notice, there's a bait car at every single rally. It's just one car sitting there burning. And then all the pictures, the media's in on it because the media takes a picture of that burning. City's on fire. Everything's going to hell. And it's not. It's one square block, and you could literally put the fire out in 2 seconds. So I think the movement has been co-opted. It's been
what do you think the motive is? What's the motive for that?
Well, the motive for, in my opinion, is economic. It always is. What you want is you want people to be mad at the leadership, which is mostly Republican. So then you can put in Democrats who can then get money and, of course, do what they do as far as donations or whatever that they've been doing with Black people for years. I don't think either party has our best interests at heart. I do not think either one of them supports us economically. It's all a game. And I think most Black people are smart enough to realize that, but they feel stuck. They're like, I want to support, I want to go out and do something about it, but I also understand some of this may be fake, and we're stuck in between a rock and a hard place. That's why I choose to focus on economics and not necessarily put myself in harm's way physically, because you could go out there and get killed or hurt for a cause that, to me, was fabricated by a lot of organizations who have seen Black people do this before and figured out how to make Black people mad, how to provoke it, and then how to implement everything I just told you, the media, the police, and then certain other apparatuses to stoke the flames. And that's what we're seeing now. I have not seen a group of Black people at a protest, basically go in trying to mess everybody up. I have not seen that. I have seen teenagers who got paid by whoever, somebody randomly. I've heard $100. If you notice, a lot of the windows get smashed out by a lot of young skateboarders because they're paying young kids to literally run, and they don't know what's going on. They're just like, oh, fire, burn it, who cares? It's summertime, it's kids out of school. What were you doing back then? So these are not, and I always say this, the Black race is the only race that's judged by the youngest of us, because our entertainers, our professional athletes, our young kids, they're the ones who are always on TV. And we're like, why do you judge our entire race off of what a bunch of people under the age of 30 are doing? No other race is judged like that except Black people. And then you have a whole bunch of older people, which I'm a part of, 30 and up, and who are responsible, who are trying to do what they're supposed to do. And unfortunately, they're not on TV. They're not the ones who you ask about. People are property owners, got kids, have own boats, got stuff to do. They're not out there raising hell. But the media has made it seem like it. And like you said, the movement has been co-opted. So whether you're white, Black, brown, be safe. And in my opinion, as a Black man, none of these protests are completely organic, only because digitally they can track you on Facebook. They can see when you put the flyers up. I mean, it's the surveillance is ridiculous on a lot of these sites. So yeah, it has been co-opted, but what can you do? And that's why I present an economic solution.
An economic way to fight back.
Yeah.
This is the ultimate weapon to have, by the way, in my opinion. I know it is yours too, but I want to let people know that Bitcoin and Black America, you don't have to feel like, oh, well, that's not me. How could this help me? But truly, I told Bill before we got started with all of this, is that I feel like you have given people here with this book the keys to freedom, sovereignty, financial security, and growth. The answers, the secret codes, the keys, whatever you want to call it, are really all in this book. And you so beautifully lay it out. I truly feel like the book would be a gift to anyone, white, Black, brown, whatever, because it really is enlightening and just so powerful. And I think this would be the best gift to give anyone or to get.
Well,
so that's my opinion.
I agree, Elsa, and I think it's in reading it was certainly enlightening to a lot of the of a reality I can't possibly relate to. But all of that aside, and I think it's very empowering information for everyone. But just aside from all of that, if you want to know about crypto and how to move forward with it, this dude lays it out, and he gives you just a ton of information that's actionable. So don't not pick it up because you might not be Black. It's
Right.
man, this thing's loaded with great information for anybody to learn and empower themselves with. I think it's awesome.
If you're just starting to learn, I don't care what color you are, pick up this book because you're going to refer back to it many, many times, which is why I got all this stickies, notes, copious notes, just so I could refer back to it because I still feel like a newbie.
Oh yeah, yeah, and I wanted to make it pretty simple so that beginners wouldn't be overwhelmed, and I wanted to make it pretty concise so that most people can get through it in a day or two. Because I want people to stop reading as much and start doing stuff. Like after you read it, then all right, let's start. You know, I'm one of those people that like action, and I don't really like sitting around talking about it too much. Especially once you know the problems, it's on you to do something about it. So,
is there an audio book?
No, sir, no audio book for this version. For the second edition, it will be yes. And
second edition.
Yes, yes. So the second edition, the 1 year anniversary, will be out July 11th. It'll be basically, it'll be most of the chapters will be redone with more information, graphs, charts, and it'll be hardcover. And yes, it'll be scarce, so it'll only be a certain amount, and I'll reveal all of those details later. But yes,
tokenize it.
Yeah,
tokenize it.
We're discussing things like that now. So it's funny you all brought that up.
Wait a minute. Did people know about this, the second edition coming, or did we just get an exclusive?
Nope. This is only the second show I've ever said it on. And yes, now that everybody knows, like I said, just look out for it. The information will be all updated. It'll be a whole lot more businesses, a whole lot more blockchain professionals, and more of a look at the global economy. You know, the international part was a little smaller in that one because I wanted to focus on America, but globally, yeah, I've written a lot more. So yes, look out for that.
Need more pictures for guys like me that are visual learners.
Exactly. Exactly. Some of the feedback I got, graphs are always good for some people. If they can see it visually, they don't even need to read the rest. So yes, I have some things like that as well.
Cool.
Well, Isaiah, it's been a pleasure. I was so excited leading up to today. I really can't tell you how much I was looking forward to talking with you and seeing you again since I saw you and met you last year, and to show off my signed copy that you gave me when I met you a year ago. I hope to see you again in person soon. And I would love to do future stories with you once Bill and I can get back on the road again with Adventures in Crypto. We just can't. It involves a lot of travel. So right now, that's not really a big option for us.
Yeah, you got to sign that iPad for me.
Oh no, I'll be sending a book your way. Don't worry about it. Yeah, I'll be sending a book your way. I appreciate it. But yeah.
Right on. Well, cool.
Thank you so much. Again, I've done a virtual hug. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you. And keep spreading the word.
Will do.